Welcome back to Talking Film for the second part of our interview with actor Norman Eshley. Having starred in the Immortal Story, one of the last films directed by Orson Welles, Norman went back into the theatre. But then he got another call from his agent. Richard Fleischer, who had recently made The Boston Strangler and 10 Rillington Place, was preparing a new thriller, See No Evil.
I don't know if you've seen that recently, but it's written by Brian Clemens, who I always think is a really great writer. And do you have any memories of making that?
Oh, very much so, because again, it was one of those extraordinary sort of conversation I had with my agent that you sometimes dream of having. I'd been lucky enough to meet John Clements, who ran Chichester, and we talked, and I'd done a few tellies and different things, and John took to me, and you know, when you see The Four Feathers and what a great man he was, and John took to me, and we were talking one day. He said, "You're not going to do any more rubbish again, Norman." He said, "I want you to come to Chichester, you know, the Great Chichester Festival Theatre." And he arranged an interview for me, and I did an audition for Peter Dews for a wonderful play called Vivat, Vivat Regina, written by Robert Bolt, Man for All Seasons, you know. And I got the part of Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. And the most wonderful actress, Eileen Atkins, was playing Queen Elizabeth I. Sarah Miles, Robert Bolt's wife, was playing Mary. And I looked at the cast and it was just extraordinary. And we rehearsed in Chichester. It went on to rave reviews. And we were then told it was going to transfer to the West End. And it was my first proper West End production. And we went to the Piccadilly Theatre. And this is, I'm leading up to this line. And after the opening night, which was amazing, I mean, there were people in the audience like Alec Guinness and all sorts of people, you know, again. And I got a phone call from my agent the next day saying, could you go and see a director called Richard Fleischer? And he said, and I went to the hotel. And this is the line I love. "Hi, Norman. Caught your play last night. How would you like to do a film opposite Mia Farrow?" So, yeah, okay. So I was 26, and they gave me the script, and it was wonderful. One of the things that my agent was rubbish at was getting me billing, because I'm always sort of down there alphabetically, and in fact it was the lead opposite Mia. So when it's sort of advertised now, I'm not mentioned, and it's a bit of a shame. But yeah, we went out and I met her, and what a charming girl she was. She was 26 as well, and we just got on like a house on fire. And you know, I was looking at her. This was Rosemary's Baby. This is, you know. And I had to learn to ride, because part of the audition that Richard Fleischer, when we were talking, not audition, but when we were talking about it, he said, "Can you ride?" And I said, "Oh, yes," because actors always lie. And I mean, I think the best I'd ridden was the donkeys at Weston-super-Mare when I was a kid. But anyway, so I went along to a very ordinary riding school. It was all heels down, tails forward, and all that sort of. But I couldn't get on with that at all. And during the process of building up, I met a wonderful stuntman called Nosher Powell.
Oh, yes.
A wonderful man. And he, I'll keep this as clean as I can. He said, "Right, he said, get your leg over the horse." He said, "You grip it with your inner thighs." He said, "You lift yourself up, you loosen yourself from the waist." And then he said, "It's like having a good chava." And it worked. Chava wasn't the word he used.
No.
But it worked. And I did all my own stunts in it. And his son, Greg, was my double, but he didn't have to be used except for jumping a fence at one point. And So much so that the group of riders that I had, they all thought I was one of them. They were sort of surprised when I spoke a couple of times. But I really got on with it, and I loved riding. And then one day, Mia and I were out, and I had to kiss her. And we were both on horses, and I had to pull her towards me and kiss her. Well, I'd never kissed a big Hollywood star before, and what do I do? So I was trying to say, look, I'll be very professional about this, Mia. Don't worry, and I won't, And I waffled on so much, and in the end, it came out. What I really said was, "Don't worry, Mia, I don't fancy you," which she started laughing because she saw what a sort of panic I was in. And it was a Sunday, so I didn't have to go back to the theatre. She said, "Never mind, Norman." So we went and sat in her caravan with a couple of other people. We drank a lot of brandy that day, but she kept laughing. "You don't fancy me, huh? Okay."
That's fantastic. She was really put through it in that film, wasn't she? It's a very good film, one of those, damsel in distress sort of films.
Oh, she never complained about anything. I mean, I've always sort of, I've had this impression that Americans do that, we do that, and you see films about them complaining that they want certain diets and things. There's nothing like that. She didn't treat me with any. I wasn't any lower than her. We used to have a laugh and a giggle together, and it was just, all this Hollywood stuff. It didn't exist as far as I was concerned. They were lovely people. Fleischer was wonderful. He was again another caring man, and all they're interested in was how to make a good film.
You were doing a lot of your own stunts, you and the other actors, weren't you?
Well, I had a horse, and I can't remember his name. Oh, it's Kabbalah, and he was a proper film horse. You'd lead him up to his mark, and he'd know it. He'd look at it, drive back, and then you ride him up to. And one day, I had to ride up and pin Mike Elphick up against the caravan holding a shotgun. And I had to throw my leg over, slide down the horse's side, and run up to him. And Kabbalah stopped in his mark. But what I forgot to do was take my left foot out of the stirrup. So it went over, and I was lying on my back, and Kabbalah just looked at me like, amateur. And, I did it on my second take, but they were so well trained. I mean, I had one accident on the set when I did fall off with a whole bunch of horses behind me. We were coming out of a yard and starting to gallop, and I fell off. And all those 8 or 9 horses went over me. Not one of them laid a foot on me. And I could easily have been very seriously hurt, but not one of them laid a foot on me.
Yeah.
But also the joy was I was working in the theatre in the evening, so I was having the best of both worlds. I'm working with, say, Eileen Atkins.
At the same time as making that one?
Yeah. We're filming during the day, theatre at night.
Yeah. Amazing.
I could have done that all my life, but obviously it doesn't work out that way. But I was pretty exhausted, but it was worth it.
If you look through your credits, I, Claudius, Warship, Department S, the Sweeney, all the classics are in there, aren't they?
Yeah, I was so lucky.
Were you as busy as it looks, or was it just work here and there? Were you kept busy all the time?
I was pretty until. Yeah, I was. I mean, if I wasn't working on television, I was working in the theatre. I was one of the lucky ones that wasn't really out of work that much. And it got to the point where I was doing I, Claudius and George and Mildred at the same time. And Herbie Wise, the director of I, Claudius, wanted me to play a very different part in I, Claudius, one that was going through it, obviously not Claudius himself. But Herbie was a great man for collecting a repertoire of actors. But there was a certain part, and I'm not going to say which one or anything, but I couldn't do it because I was doing George and Mildred. So I went in and I did 2 episodes where I killed Caligula. But I was so fortunate that nobody ever typecast me. You think, oh, he's in a comedy show, no one will pick him now. It didn't seem to matter to other people. I mean, one day I'm playing a killer of 13 women for Thriller, again written by Brian Clements. you're killing 13 women and then you're going off and doing a comedy, doing Man About the House or whatever it was. And I've just been so lucky.
When we think of the Sweeney and everything, we're looking at really when names that really were very important in television and remain important. Do you have any memories? Do you have any memories of that working with John Thaw and Dennis Waterman? And
Oh, yeah. Well, Dennis and I had known each other because we did a play in 1968, I think it was, at the Royal Court. And it was a play called Early Morning. Had some lovely people, Moira Redmond, Jack Shepherd, all sorts of people. But it was done deliberately to bring down the office of the Lord Chamberlain. And we did Sunday night performances because you know what the Lord Chamberlain would do. You'd send it to him, they put the blue pencil through it, and you couldn't do it and whatever. And this was a very interesting play. And we were told that if the police broke in, we were to break into Shakespeare. But we did it on a Sunday night, and we didn't charge the audience as an audience. What they became was club members, and we did a club performance. It was as pedantic as that. And that's where I met Dennis. We were both, I don't know, 23, he was 21 or something like that. And then we worked together on other things. And I'm not saying we were very close friends, but we were good friends. And I was so sad when he died because he had so much to offer. He was a very clever stage actor. And he was wonderful. He made you feel so welcome when you went into Minder or Sweeney or whatever. And he and John were a great combination. And Arthur Daly and him were brilliant.
that's one of the things perhaps about television in those days, is that you would have these great series where lots of great guest actors would come along, weren't they? And so you were able to have a part in all these amazing series. What was it like, say, when you arrived on the Sweeney set? Yeah. And they all know each other very well. They're probably hard drinking out from what I've read about the cast at the time. Were you made to feel welcome? Did you immediately sort of get into it?
Well, this was the joy. It always comes from the top. The director was a lovely guy called David Wicks, who's a smashing guy, and I'm still in touch with David. And it comes from John and Dennis. They're the ones who make you feel welcome. And I had a wonderful part in the Sweeney of a coward. It was beautifully written, absolutely beautifully written, and you almost couldn't go wrong. But yes, you were made to feel very welcome. And when I did a series called Warship, we, who were the regulars, we wanted to make sure that everybody who came along felt welcome, because it's funny you should mention that, because I went into the Anedin line, and it was really weird because I went into the rehearsal rooms of the BBC, and there were the men sitting here, the women there, and there was Peter Gilmore sitting by himself. And they just weren't getting on, and Gilmore had distanced himself from everybody. He hardly talked to me at all. He was a very strange man, and I didn't feel welcome in it at all. And there's been a couple like that. I mean, I used to know Lewis Collins when he came into Warship. It was one of his first television. Oh, I'll jump off the ship. No, we got stuntmen for that, don't worry. I'll do this, I'll do that. And he was a really nice kid. I went into the professionals, and he'd hardly talk to me. It had all got to him. And it's a cruel thing sometimes, that sort of fame, which I never had. But it had ruined him. And he was still underneath it all. I know, a nice guy, and I know he's dead now. But he began to believe things that people had written about him. He thought he was the great sex symbol. And he'd turn up late. And you've got wonderful actors like Gordon and Martin, and they were all there professionally on time. He'd turn up an hour late. Oh, I haven't bothered to learn my lines today. And it just got to him. It was just a very sad thing. But when I went to George Cole, I did a thing early on when I was about 22, 23, called Man of Our Times, that George was playing the Man of Our Times. And I was just absolutely in awe of meeting him. And I had this one particular scene, and it was November in St Albans, and I had to dive into this open air swimming pool. And the crew had been in with their wetsuits on to put a mirror on the bottom. And I did the shot, dived in, came up. They got the shot and they all went. And I thought, oh, okay, right, well, I'll be back in a couple of days. So I'm standing there shivering my head off, and from behind a bush came George Cole with a dirty, great big towel. Come on, my son, right, let's get you warm. And he took me back to his caravan, gave me a brandy, and we talked and we talked and we talked. I really was fascinated by him. And then years later, I go into Minder, and there's a knock on my caravan door, and it's George. And I said, oh, come in, George. I said, do you know, it's really weird. When you've got that hat on, as Arthur Daly, I said, you look just like my father. And he looked at me, he said, maybe that's why we get on so well. And he was, after all those years and just 2 conversations, he was a genuinely lovely, talented man.
Oh, that's good.
And it all comes from the top.
You mentioned your episode of The Sweeney was brilliantly written. I'm trying to remember the name of the writer because he was one of their top writers, Roger Marshall.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, wonderful writing. This is one of the things that also gets me, Greg, is that everybody sort of talks about the stars of it. It all comes down to the writers. You know, when people talk about George and Mildred, they don't talk about the writers who were wonderful. You'd look at it and laugh and you'd want to do it. And it's all Euthan Bryan or whoever, or Richard O'Sullivan and Sally Thompson, and you know, the writers do it, and nobody gives them the credit.
Actors generally do, don't they? Whenever you talk to an actor, they always say the writing. They always say the writing.
As you said, you all want to work together to bring that writing to life, but it's got to be worthwhile writing.
Can I ask you about Secret Army? Because that's another one of my favourites, and you had a very interesting role in that as well, you know, because it's another one of these roles where I suppose a character comes into a drama and has a massive effect, really, in that kind of Dennis Potter kind of way, where you come in and you befriend the young boy and it all turns out badly, sadly. But what are your memories of that? Because that was very big at the time, huge show.
Well, again, you've got the lovely Bernard Hepton. Everybody made me feel so welcome on it. Brian Glover. It was. Oh, what was his name that directed? I know him. He was.
Kenneth Ives. Kenneth Ives.
Yeah, he was a wicked bugger. He said to me one day, he said, "Look, this is all going too well," and we were friends. He said, "This is all going too well, Norm." He said, "Why don't we start having a round, make people get on a little bit edgy?" And I said, "You sure?" He said, yeah. Okay, all right. So we did this, and people began to, you know, but we'd have a drink together in the evening. It was fine. And then when we got to the studio, I was supposed to come in with my arm round Valentine Dial and come into this room where I was meeting the other soldiers and sailors that had escaped, and we were going to make our way back to England. I was going to make my way back to England with them. And suddenly Ken's voice came out from the gallery. Norman, I know you're wooden acting, but could you at least act properly in this? I thought he's pushing it a bit far. So I came back and he said, I think I'm wooden. I saw you in Last of the Mohicans. So we're having this banter, but I'm getting quite serious. And so is he, it sounds like. So I got my arm around Valentine Dial. The scene starts, action. He opens the door. He's only got these bloody soldiers sitting there in stockings and suspenders. And he bastardized. He had such a wonderful sense of humour. And then I was doing a thing with Marty Kane at one point, and she said, Norman, do you know a director called Kenneth Ives? And I said, yeah. She said, what do you think of him? I said, why, Marty? She said, we're getting on very well, and I think I want to marry him. I said, he's a wonderful, wonderful man. And they did. They got married.
Oh, I didn't realise. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, Secret Army was another one which is so brilliantly written, and those characters, Bernard Hepton, I think, is such an underrated actor. I think.
I agree with you. He's a wonderful actor. Him and the other underrated actor I love was Nigel Stock. I didn't realise that he had such a. We worked together in a play in Manchester, and I didn't realise he was in the Chindits. And he was telling me this story one day, and he wouldn't ever talk about his time, but we got him slightly pickled one night and started asking him about it because I'd heard things. And he said, well, he said, the last thing I remember there, he said, we met the big fella, which was Old Wingate, at this crossroads, and we'd been the first people to break through the Japanese lines. And he said, there are a whole group of us there, but we didn't expect to beat the Japanese at this particular. So Wingate said to all lads, he said, I don't know what you're going to do, but good luck. And I said, you're in the middle of China. I said, what did you do? He said, and this is the best line I think I've ever heard. They were in the middle of this Malayan jungle. He said, oh, I walked to China. What? How? He was a wonderful actor, and he had that ability to maintain lines and make them so real, very like Bernard Hepton. It was real. I loved working with people like that.
During George and Mildred, did you sort of experience? You must have experienced the kind of fame that you hadn't had before. Would that be the case, or?
It was strange. I first came across it in Man About the House because Paula Wilcox, her husband, again, we're going back to the National Youth Theatre. Paula was in the Youth Theatre. But she had a husband who died, unfortunately, called Derek Seaton. And this part came up of a sort of roue married man who was trying to have an affair. For some reason, he thought of me. And so I was asked to go along to Thames, and I was cast in this part. And I'd never done it. It was like that Peter O'Toole film, my favourite. Yeah, I didn't realise they had audiences. I thought it was all canned laughter. And when I found out, I'm like, oh my God. But I had been used to working in a theatre. So, and I played this guy, and we did a few, and we got laughs. And then when Richard O'Sullivan's brother came along to woo Paula, they asked me if I'd do it. And by then, Eutha and I were getting on so well, and Brian Murphy. I'm still in touch with Brian now. We were all getting on so well. They asked if I would do George and Mildred. So it was ridiculous that I got married to Paula Wilcox, and then the next week I'm the next door neighbour. So they took me to lunch at Thames, and the writers said to me, we want you to do it. I said, I can't do that. And Peter Fraser-Jones, the director, producer, said, look, just pop a moustache and glasses on and do a different accent, which I did. And I was accepted then. I'm not now. People say to me, well, you couldn't have. I didn't get comments saying, oh, did they notice it was the same actor? Between Man About the House and George and Mildred starting, I went on holiday with a girlfriend and Eutha and her boyfriend then to a place of Eutha's in Spain. She said, come on out there, love. And we went out there, and she was mucking around by the swimming pool, very relaxed. And I said, come on, let's go down to the beach. I love swimming in the sea. She said, you don't want to do that? I said, oh, come on. She said, all right. So we drove down to the beach, and it was a very big beach. And suddenly she was surrounded by all these people. And I didn't realize what I was getting into. And we're talking about a mob.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so strange. And we got back in the car, and she said, do you see what I mean? I said, yeah, okay. And for a while it was like that, wandering around London. But then don't forget, I didn't have a moustache and glasses. And so, I was relatively okay. And I was still getting cast in other things. So I was not like them. But it was very strange. You usually get reaction from people as to what you're playing. And when I played in the comedies, people are always coming up and telling me jokes. When I did the killing of people, then they sort of edge away from me, which I quite liked. And the only adverse reaction was I had a guy one day in the pub grab hold of me, shove me up against the wall and say, why are you so rotten to George? I said, hang on. I thought he was going to whack me. But it was fun. No, I had this car smash in '93, and that was the end of it all for me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think people realise that, because you carried on during the 80s. Your credits are all going through the 80s.
Yeah.
But the car crash, you haven't acted since the car crash?
I did. I did a couple of small bits, and some were nice. People just wanted me to earn a bit of money. But um, the only thing I did sort of slightly major, and it was a mistake because I really had to struggle with the lines because that's what affected me. I had a really bad smack on the frontal lobe syndrome, and I couldn't learn new things. I can remember back to when I was a child, but learning new things. I did Cadfael with Derek again, and but no, I haven't. I've done the odd voiceovers. I've had a number 6 in Germany when I was 74, working with a heavy metal group called Blind Guardian.
They
But
wanted
no, I
somebody
haven't.
with a rich British voice, did they? Is that what that was about, or?
All the yeah, so it was all the heavy stuff. And but no, it's been very strange, and I didn't realize how weak I was, and I went off on the drinking route, which yeah, was not good. But the good thing is, I am happy. I met my wife 15 years ago, and to say my life changed then is an understatement. I'm so happy. Um, she's just a wonderful person. She's the sort of person that, and it has happened to her. She'll go to the bus stop, and someone will turn around and pour their troubles out to her, and it's happened. And I can honestly say this: that in 15 years, we have not had one cross word, and that sounds ridiculous. We've been married for 9 years next month, and I would never have written my book if it hadn't been for her, and it's just been amazing.
What are you proudest of in your working life?
I do know. I've never thought of it. Um, I I think the happiest time is probably not the most important, but the happiest times was working in a studio like Thames by the river. It was a joy to go to work. There was no sort of class system like the BBC have, or you don't even meet a director. The head of comedy would come and sit down and have a chat and a drink with you. This is my wife, Florence, blah, 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 blah. And we'd all have a laugh. You'd look forward to going to work. And that period in my life at Thames Television was an absolute joy. And it wasn't our job. It wasn't our show. It was the crews. It was the floor manager, Peter Errington. It was everybody's show. And that's what I love about it.
And what about favourite people to work with? Who do you think you've sort of, actor-wise, enjoyed working with, learnt from? Because we haven't even talked about Derek Jacobi and John Hurt and people like that. So it's incredible, really.
But Derek is probably my sort of all-time in awe of him. when I did Cadfael, I mean, not only in awe, but he's just such a modest man. And when I went to do Cadfael, he said, "Oh, thank God you're here, love." He said, well, "Let's go out for a meal tonight." So we went out with Sarah Bedell. Now, it was my first night in Hungary, and I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, I've never been here before. Now, it's not just goulash. He takes me to a bloody Chinese restaurant." But he's such a modest, wonderful man.
Was John Hurt difficult, or was he sort of at that time when you were working with him?
He could switch so quickly. One day he was really friendly, and the next day he wasn't. He was a bit of a. I like John. Don't get me wrong, but and I think he's a wonderful actor. But he could be a bit prickly. That's all I'm going to say.
What was your favourite part then? What do you think? What do you think you'd like to be remembered for? I mean, you'll probably be remembered for George and Mildred, I expect.
I was proud of the Sweeney. I loved that. It was beautifully written. And some of the stuff I did on stage, I was quite pleased with. I don't know. I've loved the variety of it. I think the yeah, it was the variety of the stuff you could do. The strange thing is, I've been out of the business now longer than I was in it. I was out the other day and somebody came up to me and said, weren't you in George? And I thought, I was 31 then. I'm 78 now. What the hell? But they still recognise me. I can't understand it. It's weird.
And your voice as well is obviously very, very distinct. I said to you when I met you, it's so distinctive, your voice, you know. The interesting thing about your Sweeney episode, just finally, is that I watched it again recently because I'm a big fan of the Sweeney. And your character sort of represents the everyman in a way, the person who is suddenly, you're an ambitious police officer, you're a very good police officer, but you are suddenly confronted with shootouts and things like this, which, the Sweeney takes it for granted these people are hard. But the average person going into that is not going to react, well. So I think that episode is a really good study in fear,
Yeah. I think I loved doing it, and I was very honoured to have that one to do. As I said, David Wicks was still in touch, but it was no coincidence that the two most popular things that David directed, he was top of the list of popular episodes with Taste of Fear, and he directed the film. He's a wonderful director.
Oh, well, listen. Thank you ever so much for your time. It's been really nice to talk to you. Real pleasure.
Thank you so much, Greg.
And take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Huge thanks to Norman Eshley for his time. It was a pleasure to talk to him. Here's a few notes you might enjoy. Nosher Powell, the stuntman who taught Norman to ride horses, was a legend who had been Sean Connery's stunt double on Bond. In the 1980s, he became a cult hero to fans of the Comic Strip Presents alternative comedy series. Nosher's son, Greg, who did the stunts on See No Evil, has since done everything from Band of Brothers to Bourne to Fast and Furious. The word chava, which Norman used as a euphemism for sex, is a piece of Polari slang. The Chindits, which Nigel Stock served with, were a special operations unit operating behind enemy lines in Burma during World War II. Finally, Norman mentioned that he'd been writing. His book, The Dream Time of the Artful Dodger, written with Elizabeth Revel, imagines how the Artful Dodger survived after the pages of Oliver Twist. It's been published to great reviews. Check it out if you can. We'll be back soon with more stories from the film set in Talking Film.
Talking Film was produced and presented by Greg Lewis. It was a Magic Rat production.